So this video is about active listening, not passive listening where you're listening to some other person talking and all you're really getting is this wah, 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 and you're not paying any attention to what it is that they're saying. And you're just nodding politely because that's what you do in a conversation. Active listening is about having all your attention over there at this other person so that you can really understand where they're coming from and get a flavour of what it is that they're truly trying to say. And if you can do that and do that on a consistent basis, then what you're doing is really deepening the nature of your relationship. And this will work not just with your relationships at home, with your children and your siblings or your partner or your parents, but it also makes for very powerful and effective working relationships because people universally feel that they need to be met. And listening does that. So today's video is just 7 basic tips to talk about how you can listen in a really active way. So the first part of that is to not have any judgments when you're listening. It's really easy to go into a conversation believing I am right and they are wrong. Well, you're never going to get anywhere like that if you're listening and having a conversation that way. You have to be able to suspend your judgment if you can, or at least be transparent about the fact that you're being judgmental. But ideally to try and really not be judgmental about what it is that this person is saying. Because what that then does is it opens up the opportunity for them and the opportunity for them to really talk freely and candidly about it, how it is that they feel or what their thoughts are on this particular subject. The second part is try as also not to make any assumptions. If you start to assume that you understand somebody, I think we've all said it, you know, someone says, do you know what I mean? And you go, yeah, I know what you mean. And really you've got no idea at all. You're doing it as a pleasantry, you're doing it as a politeness. But really what it means is you just don't understand. You haven't heard them. And so in my opinion, it's more powerful for the relationship if you go, well, actually, no, I don't understand, but I'd really like to. Then you're opening this person up to explain it in a different way. And yes, the conversation takes longer. And yes, you might have to work a little bit harder to try and understand them. But how much more powerful the relationship would be if you did it that way. So, no judgment, no assumptions. And then the third part is to make sure that you listen to understand. So you're not trying to listen so that you're able to make your point afterwards, so that you can prove that you know more or that you're more intelligent or that you got your point across. You're listening to understand this other person. And then what that then feeds into is this almost endless desire that we have to be able to, rather than listen, what we're doing is we're thinking about, what am I going to say next? What clever thing am I going to say to be able to get one over on this other person or seem the one who's the more intelligent? So it's important, as well as listening to understand, that we listen in silence. And I don't just mean silence out there, but as best we can to be silent in here as well. Stop trying to formulate your next sentence when this other person is talking. Please listen to try and understand. And then when the time comes in the conversation, then you can say your bit. But while you're listening, while you're actively listening, you can't actively listen while you're trying to construct your own sentence in response. You have to listen to what it is that someone's saying and then reply. Which feeds into the fifth part of it, which is when somebody's trying to explain something to you, wait until they finish. One, it's just polite. But 2, if somebody feels that they have the floor, they have the space, then suddenly there isn't this, You know that feeling where you're trying to say something really, really fast because you're desperately trying to get it out before someone else cuts in? You know that feeling? Happens in my family all the time around the dinner table or the lunch table. You know, everyone's vying for the attention, everyone's vying to say what it is that they want to say. But if someone feels like they really have the space to be able to talk, then suddenly they don't feel so stressed. Suddenly they don't feel so worried. And when that happens, they drop down into a much more relaxed place where they're feeling like they're not trying to compete with you to be able to talk. And then they talk more eloquently, and then they talk more openly. Then they talk from a much deeper place in themselves. And again, you start to deepen the relationship, which is what listening is all about. Great, so point 6. So when this person's finished, then you're at the point where you can then ask questions. So you're asking questions to clarify. You're not instantly going to jump in and say, well, I think this, and this. You're trying to make sure that you're asking questions so that you know that you really understand this person. You're trying to get clarity. And maybe you'll jump in the middle and just ask for clarifying questions. But if you can wait until the end and make sure then that you ask those questions so that you can really say that you can understand what it is that someone's saying. And then the final part, which is then for you to, the first thing that you do is that you then reflect back what it is that this person is saying. And you say, what I hear you saying is this. And in doing that, one, you're giving yourself the opportunity to reflect it back so that they can hear what you've understood. It may be right, it may not, but then it gives them the opportunity to be able to say to you what they really meant. There's no shame in having listened to someone and not understood. But if you make it clear to them that you don't understand, then you're in a position to be able to give them the opportunity to be clear about it. So there are those 7 points. Very, very simplified, but really at the foundation of all your listening skills, which I use a lot in coaching, I use it a lot in the Samaritans, but I also use it a lot in my private life and in my professional life as well, because it just means that you understand people more fully, and it makes for much more full and enriched relationships. I think it's the American Indians had a thing called the talking stick. And when the tribe sat around the campfire and they had discussions about what important matters of the day, someone held the talking stick. And it was for them to be able to hold that and say, I am the one that is talking. And this means that everyone else listens. So it was a mark of respect from everybody in the around the fire that said, this person is speaking. But it also forced people to listen to what it was the person was saying. And then they would pass it on to someone else, and so on and so forth. The power of listening is, in a way, so much more powerful than the power of talking. It was one of my teachers said, at schools we're learned to speak. We're taught to public speak. We're taught to give presentations. We're taught to do all of these things. But very rarely are we actually actively taught to listen. Listening is where the power is. Listening is where the compassion lies. Listening is where the gratitude and the appreciation and understanding for another human being comes about. So please practice active listening. It's one of the tools that I use in the mindful movement workshops that I run to try and get people to really understand each other in the room and also take that skill into their everyday lives. So I hope that's useful. Again, like always, please post comments in the comments box. And if you've got any further questions about that, then you can always contact me by email, david@potentialitycoaching.co.uk, and on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm on all those social media channels. It would be great to have a conversation. So now, because I've dropped my remote control, I'm going to reach over and I'm going to press stop. Thanks for listening.